Tonight we got a specific topic. Usually conversations with Deon is all about the mind, how we as human beings function, the relationship between the conscious and the subconscious. But tonight's topic is obviously slightly different. It's about player welfare. And I'm going to actually hand over the reins to Robbi Kempson. If you don't mind taking over and maybe introduce the guys on the panel and yourself. I know Robbi, I've known him for a while now. Amazing. You know what? You are a coach and a great coach in the rugby field, and you've obviously contributed so much to the sport. But I just want to say that to the guys, that's participants and the rest of them, you're actually a bloody nice guy. End of story. And I think that's probably more important to me than anything else. So, Robbi, I'm going to hand over to you if you want to maybe introduce the other guys and get the conversation going. What about player welfare? Is it required or not?
Great. Yeah, thanks, Deon. That's probably the first compliment I'll get from a panelist, particularly not from Braam's side, I'm sure. Thanks everyone for joining in today. What I think we'll do is we actually go through each of the panelists, and perhaps you can introduce yourself, give a short bio of exactly who you are, where you're from, what you've perhaps achieved throughout your life so far, and then we can go into the next steps, which is about the mental health of sportsmen, and particularly sports people that have been there, done that, from your own experiences, and perhaps from other teammates' experiences. I mean, Braam and I had a teammate that literally melted down in Canberra when we were playing against the Brumbies one year. So there are different experiences from all of us, but I think we'll start with you, Braam, just a short introduction of yourself and where you've come from.
Yeah, Robbi, I'm an Afrikaans boy from Pretoria, played a bit of rugby, played 21 tests for the Boks, traveled all over South Africa playing for every team possible. So I was known as the chameleon of South African rugby, which was quite nice. I really enjoyed my time as a professional rugby player. Again, for me, that is who I am. I've learned so much about myself in the game, and the game is who I am. Again, nobody told me how difficult it will be post professional rugby. We never had that conversations, and what was quite interesting was I had to start from scratch twice in my life already. But again in life, rugby gave me that ability to be really tough, tough-minded, or in Afrikaans we've got a word that really rings the tone, haragat. And I think that's part and parcel of who I am. No, if somebody says something can't be done, I'm the first one to put up my hand and says, yes, it can be done. So yes, it's been an incredible transition for me. The big thing for me is there's different ways of looking at this player welfare. I think while you're playing, after you've played, and again, I think knowledge is power. As an individual, I never knew what I know now. I wish I did. So for me, it wasn't a smooth transition. I made some early mistakes after my rugby career. Invested in some big things, but again, didn't know any better. So if I knew then what I know now, I probably wouldn't have done that. And again, some really important things happened in my life. I'm married to a wonderful lady that has backed me all the way. So she knew who I am and what I was made from. And again, for me, the biggest thing, the transition after rugby, getting from being a professional rugby player, earning top dollar, to eventually earning nothing, because you didn't plan ahead. You thought you knew, but you didn't know. And again, you play rugby for a period of time. After that, there's still a hell of a long life to make sure that you make ends meet. Like I said, I've been very fortunate to be tagging along with some really incredible people. I really enjoy my coaching, and that's where I see these things happen every day, because I'm now busy. I've coached with the International Rugby Academy, where these guys chase a dream, and the dream only stays a dream for a long period. These youngsters only see rugby as their future. The big thing here is, and that's why my son, he's very smart. He's clever. He studies civil engineering. He could have been a professional rugby player, but for me, in the transition that I had, I had second thoughts of actually telling him to go for it, and that's part and parcel of what has happened to me. The big thing is, I think and again, looking at the what has transpired within my life, I wish I had people that could guide me. And again, I think, Deon, what you're doing is making people ready for and teaching people how to do things better. I never knew that. Again, thought I was clever, again, thinking that you know everything in life. So again, those things, somebody needs to pull you by the scruff and say, hey, and I think that platform is not there. We're looking at player welfare, and we talk about player welfare, and how people live their lives after rugby. They are the forgotten heroes, to say the least. Again, I think there needs to be a platform where people can be assisted while they're playing, and I think that platform is not there. I think there are people that are saying that it is there, but it's not there. And again, when you stop playing, you're just another number within the society. But again, thinking back, I wouldn't have changed anything. Being a Springbok was absolutely fantastic. It gave me, it means more to me now than it meant to me when I was actually a player, because at the moment in business, whenever I phone someone, I get the opportunity to talk to them, the door is open. So those are the things that really opened the doors for me at the age of 50. But again, probably because I was stuck trying to do something as a guest house owner. It was a very, very tough situation that I was in. And again, learned the lessons. At the moment, it's going really well with me. I'm very blessed. Let's go well with my family. And those are the things that I think I've played rugby till I was 34, 35. And for 15 years, it's been a struggle. And I think people need to understand what that relates to. Yes, that's my thoughts. I think when some of the other guys come to the fore and talk about their things, it will trigger some more things in my life. But again, I think the game has given me something very, very special, and that is to never go and lie down. I will always fight another day, and it's just who I am. You can ask Robbi. I'm one of those tough guys that's got a very, very tough mindset. I'm very, very fortunate that the game has given me so much, and hopefully I can give so much back in the future, and get these guys to understand how important it is to look at the future and make sure that you provide for the future, because the most important thing in my life is my family. And again, my extended family are the rugby community. And it's at the moment, it's an absolute joy being involved with Varsity Cup, coaching at CUT. I really, really enjoy it. The students are a different breed, but we all know that. But for me, at the moment, I'm very comfortable where I am. It's going really, really well, as I said, but it took a long time to get where I am. And sometimes I think that is the one thing that I think the guys around the rugby fraternity, business people, needs to sit these guys down and say, you know what, there's more important things in life to drive big cars, to own a big house, look after yourself, and make sure you plan for your future. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Mohammed. Just a reminder that you can post questions in the comments section, and obviously we'll try and get to as many of those as we can. Robin Peterson, your turn.
Firstly, thanks, Braam, for sharing that. A lot of it resonated with me in terms of that shared experience. But yeah, I was privileged enough to play professional cricket for 20 years. Similar to you, Braam, left school and straight into professional setup with no skills of what to expect. I think on reflection now, looking back, becoming a coach and having young boys sort of my age coming into a system, you're starting to realize the lack of skills that they have. I think firstly on my career, I realized that cricket has given me a lot. In the same way as you, it makes you resilient. I think there's a lot of skills you learn from cricket you learn from sport that you can use to transition into life. But I don't think you're made aware while you're playing that those skills are really beneficial when you go on further after your game. My career was also retired, went straight into commentary, bumped into Robbi quite a few times around the hotels doing work, but I didn't feel a sense of fulfillment. I think I was doing commentary, went straight into junior structures coaching at under 18, under 19 level South African cricketers, SA under 19, and I started to see there was a real gap in the market in terms of, just well-being and welfare and just trying to guide kids and mentorship, if you want, along their journeys. And now becoming a coach of a franchise team or Division 1 team, you're starting to learn there's a different type of player when he's transitioning from getting close to retirement. And it's a scary thing for players. I've been there, so I try and pass on my knowledge, but I do think there's certain skills that are lacking within the system across coaching that, it's really critical for players to know, because as you alluded to, Braam, players, you earn back to front. You earn a lot at the start of your career, and as you go along, that earning capacity diminishes until you have to find your second coming. So for me, I was fortunate enough to have networked, coached in the Caribbean, in the CPL, coached in the T10 in Dubai, and then finally settling here at the Warriors in Port Elizabeth and sort of starting my journey in the professional coaching structure. So, once I started my first year, I realized that I lacked a little bit of skills. You do all the coaching badges, but that's only teaching you about cricket. And I realized very quickly that there's more to this job than actual teaching people how to play the game. It's more teaching them how to transition and after cricket, and giving them skills to that they can take long after their careers. So I went on to study for my sins. I did my master's in the UK in sports leadership and sports business. So I was very fortunate to finish, and I had some people behind me backing me. So that was sort of my journey, throughout my career. But the one thing I did realize is that as coaches, and a lot of my sort of contemporaries that I chat to, we tend to use athletes or cricketers in my industry as performance tools, just to get the win for your career as a coach, where sometimes we forget that these are human beings that, we have to equip them with certain skills to last them for the rest of their lives. Because actually, as a coach, that's the position you're in. You're in a privileged position to actually influence people's lives for the rest of their lives. So it's more than just wins or losses. For me, it's about actually adding value to the rest of their lives, because that's actually what sport's about. Often we think that your kids are supposed to be professionals, earn a living, earn a career. But actually, at any level, whether it's club sport, university sport, school sport, there's certain skills that sports teaches you, from teamwork, resilience, failure, success. And it can be all confusing for an athlete, no matter what your age, to deal with that. So those are learnings that I'm finding at the moment. And, I'm trying to upskill myself, and with forums like this, just to learn with your experiences how to sort of overcome that. So I'm very excited to be on here and just share part of my journey and my experiences. And hopefully, even if I can help one person, that'll mean a lot to me.
Super. Thanks, Robin. Really appreciate that. Move on to Chris. Chris, well, I think you retired very recently compared to the rest of us. But one or two of the Olympics things that comes to mind with regards to 15-man players that came into the squad for the Olympics and kind of put you on the back foot, and how that perhaps transpired and how to your mental health, and also now being recently retired, and what's next? How do you cope with everything that's going on in your life, and what's the next chapter?
Yeah, thanks guys. And I think you say recently retired, but I want everyone just to also know that I watched those 10s, and I saw Braam slot that kick from quite far out. So I think we got a lot in common. We both recently retired, and we were both, I also said CUT, so Braam, I think me and you got something in common over there. But guys, I think, I think this is something that it really needs to people that really need to hear, and as players, and there's going to be a start and there's going to be an end. And I think where I'm at now is that I've just recently retired, and starting something completely new. Something completely that I always had understanding about, but I've been almost taken completely out of my small little world and be placed in a complete new one. So yeah, at the moment I'm a quantity surveyor. I studied quantity surveying and studied construction management while I was playing, because everyone said it was important to do, but they never explained why it's important. And yes, you can study, but what is next? And I think that's where I find myself now at the moment, is that transitioning into a new place, being 34 years old, and you've got no understanding of that world. And the one thing at rugby, you're very protected in a sense as well, because everything is done for you. You're well looked after financially. You're doing very well, and then you have to start something completely new, and then all of a sudden you're looking left and right, and you're looking for that support that was always mates around you, but no one taught you how to go to that next phase. I see that in one of the comments that said, "Chat, has anyone spoken to you about retirement and saving?" Thanks for the question. And yes, people definitely speak to you about it, but you don't have the understanding why, and what am I saving towards? Because I don't understand. Like, yes, rugby's going well, that's my focus, and what am I saving towards? Yes, and Braam mentioned it's family, and and there's so much things that outside of this rugby world that which becomes very important, and it's one of the things that you were taught to do, but you weren't taught how and why. And I think my struggle personally is being taken out of that world where we had a system and you were sort of protected, and now you've got to be an adult and look after yourself, and go into that world and try and climb a ladder again. Like Braam also mentioned, you have to literally start at the bottom, try and climb yourself way up, but you feel like you're always behind. And I think it's a very difficult one. I thought when I retired, I called the day, and the next day I actually started a job. I started with a project, did some construction because that's what I knew, and I went straight into it just to get my mind off the rugby part, but it always comes back to you in the sense that you're always looking for a place again, and you're always looking to, how do I find myself outside of this protected world, which is sport, and find myself again in a completely new world. And I think that's where I'm currently.
No, great, thanks very much, Chris. Over to you, Trevor. A very interesting one. I think just your background as well, and how you managed to get into what you are doing right now through your coaching setup, which I started this morning. Thanks very much. And getting yourself, back from injury, some serious injuries, some career-threatening injuries, and the importance of getting your head right.
Thanks, Robbi. So my name is Trevor Hall, and I'm a counseling psychologist and an ex-professional rugby player. So I played quite a number of games for the Lions. And then I went overseas and did a stint at Biarritz Olympic when the team was still very good and in the top 14. And then when I retired, I went back to university from scratch, and I started my education, my journey towards being a qualified psychologist and psychotherapist, which took me about, I think it was 8 years to be fully qualified. So obviously, being an ex-professional rugby player, I had quite a few injuries, through my career and whatnot, and I was always quite observant of, how I myself got through these injuries, and also how other people got through them and whatnot. And I took that interest into my research dissertation for my master's, and then also my postgraduate research as well. So I published a paper in the South African Journal of Sports Medicine on the experiences of injured Super Rugby players, and then another one on a group intervention that I designed and actually implemented with a professional team up in Johannesburg in 2019. So what's interesting about this discussion already is that there's certain themes that are coming out as well. You know, that what Braam was touching on is sort of fallen heroes to a certain extent, the transition from professional sport into normal life. And then what Robin was saying as well, in terms of there being quite a focus on performance in these professional teams, and sometimes the humanity of these players are kind of, you know, so it's a secondary thing, or secondary to performance. And what I've noticed through my work, so I'm a psychotherapist at the moment as well, so I run a private practice in Cape Town, and I built it over the last couple of years and whatnot. And I see quite a healthy mix of sports people and just the general population who are dealing with issues of anxiety, depression, etc., like that. But what I've seen in sports from a personal perspective and also from a professional perspective is that there is this gap, like Braam was saying, or Robin was saying earlier, that there's this lack of a platform for people, for these sports people, to develop across certain facets of themselves. So if I look at, if I think about player welfare, which is the topic of this conversation, what I think of immediately is opportunities for players to develop across physical, psychological, and social facets. So, and what I would say as well is, from a financial perspective, that would kind of straddle the psychological and the social as well. And I feel that there are very well-meaning people involved in player welfare across these teams in South Africa, especially in Europe as well. I think there's teams such as Saracens, for example, overseas. They seem to have quite a good formula in terms of looking after their players, especially from a financial perspective. I know that there's a lot of work that goes into creating financial prosperity for them, teaching, education, so that when they do retire, there is some sort of, they have something to go to. Now, obviously, a lot of players, you know, will take advantage of that, and some might fall by the wayside, depending on who they are and that type of thing. I think in South Africa, if I'm correct, the Sharks, for example, I think they've got quite a heavy player welfare program attached to education and also financial education. But I think what's sorely lacking still, which ties into what Robin was saying earlier about performance, is that the psychological, and what I mean by that is how you think and how you feel, is sorely underappreciated. And there's not enough emphasis placed on the development of players' emotional maturity, psychological maturity, cognitive maturity. And I think what happens is, because of that, when these players retire, like what Chris was saying, there's almost like this developmental lag that takes place. And, you know, suddenly you're confronted with the real world. What Braam was saying, you're the sort of fallen hero now. You don't have the skills, or at least it seems as though one doesn't have the skills to go and operate in the world. And there is that sort of year or 2 year lag where people are really confronted with real life and whatnot, and can actually push them into what I would consider almost a diagnosable depression. I mean, I'm not too sure about what you guys experienced personally, but I haven't met many players from the rugby fraternity who have retired, who haven't gone through at least a year of quite an impactful confrontation with sort of depression and anxiety and that sort of thing as well. So just quickly to chat about the potential platforms as well, what can be done to help this player welfare issue. Something that I really wanted to hone in on from my psychological practice and research was the injury recovery process. And the reason why I chose that was because I think that when players are injured during their career is probably the best time to intervene at a psychological level. I don't know who it was before. I think it might have been Robin, when, saying that when you're playing, when you're actually in the midst of your career and whatnot, developing these facets of yourself outside of the physical is something very foreign. You can speak to these players as much as you like and say, listen, you've got to plan for the future. You've got to, you've got to develop your relational skills. You've got to develop all of these other things. But while they're playing, it's like water for duck's back, But what happens when the player is injured is that suddenly they're confronted with their mortality. It's like, well, okay, I'm not going to perhaps play forever. I'm not completely indestructible. I'm in conflict. And that's the stage that you can intervene with these players and go, okay, well, now that you've been confronted in this way, here's a platform that you can now use to start skilling yourself up, etc., so that when these things happen again, you understand what to do. It's not the end of the world. It's painful. It's something that's confrontational, but you can get through it. And you mentioned earlier, Robbi, the program that we've designed, which is called Comeback. It was based on that, or one of those principles of getting to these players when they're in conflict while they're injured. And it's a 6-week program that basically takes them through a whole lot of psychologically based tasks that skills them up to become more resilient, to understand themselves a lot better, to learn skills of de-stressing, and basically come back from that injury a lot more intact than they would have beforehand. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey.
No, sure. Thanks, Trevor. I think you've hit the nail spot on there. Now, just working with the guys at the Southern Kings, these younger players, they've got no interest, as Marissa, going to your question, they've got no interest in saving money. They'd rather spend it on cars and going out at night and have fun. And you're spot on. I think when that injury hits eventually, it's the best time perhaps, get into their psyche.
And just to add to that quickly, Robbi, if I may, one of the things, so I mean, there are a lot of psychologists and I suppose mental health practitioners who work with these teams. But getting back to what Robin was saying is that I feel that often we miss the mark. You kind of get sucked into the performance side of things. What are the skills of performance? How do you zero out after you've made a mistake? These very basic skills that are worthwhile. I think they do work to a certain degree, but they're superficial a lot of the time. I mean, it takes sort of 1 or 2 sessions and then that's it. But I feel that when they're working in this performance space, the opportunities that arise to actually do real work at that deeper level, where you can help these players really develop the emotional and relationship side of things, often gets missed.
Oh, spot on. Oh, thanks very much, Trevor. Renaldo, we're going to move on to you, my mate. Sure, you've had a torrid time of it. Starting with the World Cup, missing out on that selection, and then injuries that have just really scuppered your career on quite a consistent basis. And then, your final injury that you didn't have insurance for right towards the end.
Yeah, sorry. Nice to see you guys. I'm glad to see you guys have some electricity in South Africa at the moment, so that's good. It's been a really tough time for me, Robbi. Obviously, I stopped playing 2 years ago after I stopped at Harlequins, and then we just continued with my business that I started while I was still at Quins. And then obviously transitioned back into rugby, just going through a life cycle, which I'll explain a bit more now. And then back out of rugby again, and now in the same situation where do I continue playing or do I retire or what's the kind of next steps for me? But I think what Trevor said earlier about the injury, I mean, obviously with Harlequins, I broke my arm 3 times, so I was injured quite a bit. Luckily, I did do some stuff off the pitch and started my own business, my own brand, which I worked on quite a lot when I was still at Harlequins, and obviously learned a lot. And it's something that guys don't do, and it's a massive issue in rugby. And I think the biggest thing that I've taken out of the last 2 years and my whole playing career is just like rugby players as a team when you're with a club. But I don't think when we stop playing rugby or whatever, like there's that groups are gone. Like you're not part of that team anymore. And I don't think guys support each other. And that's our own responsibility. It's my responsibility. It's Trevor's responsibility. It's all of us to continue moving with each other as a group, as guys going from rugby into business, supporting each other in your business. I mean, like I run a brand now, and the only thing that I always hear from guys is they want to get free stuff or whatever the case may be. But again, when you transition into like that work environment, then you can't get stuff for free the rest of your life. So for me, that's still interesting, being in rugby, having my own brand, having my own business, being a sponsor of the Stormers and the Blue Bulls and rugby teams. It's quite astonishing to see like how people develop in terms of players, but again, also in the business aspect, like rugby players has a very, I don't know what to call it, but it's always just, you get like Chris earlier said, like everything is given to you on a plate, and that's not going to happen the rest of your life. So I think rugby players as a whole has a very big responsibility towards themselves to educate themselves on all of the different levels. And I mean, for me, that's the biggest thing. I didn't do all of these things when I was younger, when I was playing in South Africa and playing for the Pumas. For me, it was just all about the rugby and just kind of living every week and having a good time. And when I came to the UK, like my mind changed a bit, just how everything goes. And then obviously the older you get, your career, then obviously that's the things you start thinking about, life after rugby. What are you going to do? And luckily I made some good decisions with a brand and a business that I started. But again, I had that lack of business skills that you guys were chatting about, and life skills. I mean, I've been through absolutely horrendous time the last years. When I stopped playing rugby, I started drinking heavily. I drank a lot. I think I was probably an alcoholist at that time for a long time after rugby, and just being depressed. I mean, at the moment, I'm also still a bit depressed, anxiety, seeing a psychologist, but at least I'm doing something proactive with it, and I can speak about it on an open platform. I can say that I did abuse alcohol. I did want to commit suicide at a time, and then I went back into rugby, and everything was great again last year for Tel Aviv Heat, and I captained the team. It was amazing. And playing in a semi-final 2-3 months ago, I dislocated my knee and tore all my knee ligaments. My foot's paralyzed at the moment. I can't move my foot. And now I'm back to moving through depression, through anxiety, going back to the professional environment. And then all of a sudden, this hits me. I was waiting to go and play my last World Cup next year for Namibia again. That was on my plans. Everything was going well. And then this big thing hit me. And again, I went through a transition from Harlequins to my business for 2 years, and then went back to rugby. Then obviously that skills that I didn't have when I was playing, didn't learn myself or educate myself. And like everyone has been saying, like these things aren't something that we are taught as professional rugby players. We are taught to perform on a physical level on a weekend. And that's something you do week in, week out. I mean, I had Jimmy Stonehouse as a coach for many years. So, I mean, as you guys can imagine, it's a drill how we are made. And no one really focuses on, I mean, our rugby players are soft because they've got feelings. Every rugby player has feelings. Every guy has emotions, but we all keep it bottled up, and no one speaks about it. No one says they are depressed or they are anxious. And that's something that I opened up towards last year and said, I had a problem with alcohol abuse after I stopped playing rugby. Even when I was playing rugby, weekends, I drank too much. And none of the guys, or there are people that say it, but not everyone is open to a platform or to say or be honest about it. So I think for me, like personally, the player welfare aspects is there. I mean, at the moment, I was very grateful for the RPA here in the UK, the Rugby Players Association, and Harlequins as well, obviously after my injury, not having, insurance, all those things. So luckily they could guide me, help me set up to see a psychologist, speak about all these things, and just try to make sense of everything and just kind of get through the injury part where I am still at the moment. I mean, I still need to get another ankle operation. I need to get another knee operation. So my road for recovery is still a very long road ahead. But luckily, when I did start playing, like everything that we mentioned today, or that you all mentioned, like at least I started a bit of it. It wasn't massive, but luckily I had something to go back on and continue growing. But I think it's definitely a massive area of concern in South Africa, at least, and also in the rest of the world. I think it's something that we as rugby players or ex-professional sports people that have gone through these type of life cycles or whatever needs to be there for younger guys. And I mean, like Trevor also said, I mean, I played with Trevor at the Lions, and you always get those guys coming back and saying, guys, you need to save money, you need to do this. But at the end of the day, when you're that young, like you haven't been through enough emotional stress or all those things. Those type of things are not things that you think about when you at that age. But if you have a great mentor or someone to learn you life skills, business skills, how to deal with depression, how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with setbacks in your career, then I think when you get to the age of 30 or whatever the age you want to retire or whatever, you are educated in that type of area. So you have the right tools to attack the situation that arises. When I stopped playing, the only thing I had to get out of my anxiety was alcohol. And that's the only thing I knew. No one taught me another skill. I didn't have 50 guys to go back to tomorrow morning. I had my office where I was playing rugby for 15 or 14 years, had 40, 50 guys every day. It's a buzz. I mean, it's unbelievable privilege to be in that situation for such a long time. But then you get from that, going to your office on your own, where I'm sitting at the moment, and having to process everything like injuries. What are you going to do? How are you going to survive? You earn a substantial amount of money on a monthly basis for 10 years or whatever. What is your next steps? What are you going to do? And when you get to that situation and you didn't make the right plans, or you didn't connect with the right people, you are in big trouble. And that's where I kind of had myself too. But luckily, like I said, I did start something. So I did do something right in some aspects, but it could have been a lot better if I had the right tools to handle depression, to handle anxiety, and not get myself into that situation of dealing with all of those things. And again, that's something that I did on my own. Like, I didn't speak to anyone. I didn't phone my friend Jock or anyone that I played with or say, hey, I'm going through a tough time, I'm depressed, because it's just something we don't always talk about. So yeah, I think just from that point of view, I think it's a great initiative to talk about these things, first of all, today, and just opening up and just say that rugby in South Africa, I said to my wife, I'm so excited that rugby is being, the stadiums are full again in South Africa. It's unbelievable to see. And I'm so glad that rugby is really picking up in South Africa. I mean, the state of the sport in South Africa was really going down. And I mean, that's why so many players left a couple of years ago. So it's amazing to see that. But I think it's more important to see those guys being developed, not just on a rugby aspect, but in a business aspect. And like Trevor said, I can see that the Sharks are really pushing that type of things towards their players, which is unbelievable to see. And I'm really grateful that they would be able to have those type of platforms to kind of help them, guide them, and just giving them the right tools to deal with.
Can I hop in there? So just to carry on with what Renaldo is saying there as well, and also to harp on about the injury process, and why it's such an important part of player welfare, is because it presents the team and the players who are injured, and the actual team as well, an opportunity to actually get together in some sort of group, which is something that I designed as well a couple of years back, which I said, I called it the Recovery Mastery Group, where you got senior players who were injured, junior players who were injured, in a weekly session together, away from the rest of the team. So it's a team within a team, and it's and it was a skills exchange, really. And eventually what sort of happens with that, when you've got this type of platform, is that the guys start talking to each other. And as soon as you've got, you guys know from being in teams and also working and whatnot, as soon as you've got people talking to each other, amazing things can happen. When those skills start to be exchanged and people start to open up a little bit about the experiences of rugby, of what they're going through, what works for them, what doesn't work for them. There's some sort of connection that happens between those people, and when they've healed and gone through that whole injury recovery process, they go back into the team a much more integrated person. They take all of that stuff with them, and it kind of disseminates into the team as well. And I think it's such a unfortunate thing that the injury recovery process is so overlooked in professional sports. Again, where there's this focus on performance rather than going, okay, well, if we're going to look at player welfare from a psychological perspective, I'm not talking about specifically financial and physical, but from a psychological perspective, that your injury process is basically the in, like it's, it presents itself. That's where it is. That's where the platforms can actually be created and used.
Trevor, if I just jump on board, just on that specific, because, you're saying with the injuries, I tore an ACL, and I knew it was going to be a long process, also being a little bit older. And 2 weeks later, one of the youngsters, 19 years old, unfortunately tore his ACL as well. And we went through this, you talk about this recovery process, we had to go through it together. And, for him, a youngster coming in, I was sort of, I made it my mission to almost look after him, and take him through that process, because I knew it was needed because he was young. But then again, I would leave and go home, and then I'd say, but I also need that type of support. It needs to be, the circle needs to be complete. And I think it's such a, I want to say a gateway, especially when you're injured, because like Renaldo said, you're injured, you're happy because you're still training in the environment, but then you go home and you sit and you say, what now? Now I'm alone.
Exactly.
And, that process, like I said, it needs to be, there always needs to be, even though you're a senior and you think, oh, I'm feeling great because I'm helping someone, you also need that little bit of help and that little bit of guidance, that little bit of chat, and say, listen, I was also there. But there's opportunity to gain understanding, even from a youngster throughout to even to an older guy. So 100%.
The gateway is there, and just to sort of, not a random fact, but from the psychological literature, looking at what triggers mental distress and mental illness in sports people generally across the world, and this was a meta-analysis of studies that was done, I think, in 2019. And basically what the results are is that the number one trigger of mental distress and mental illness in sports people is injury, severe injuries. And, and a distant second and third are performance and relationship issues. So, it makes sense that would be your gateway into player wellness or welfare within the sporting community if you're looking at psychological health, basically. It's such a powerful time to really go in and start skilling people and start creating connections between people.
Trev, can I just jump in there and sorry, for the ugly face, this ugly face has been sitting and listening for a while. John Meintjes, sports conditioning coach, not a player. Wish I could have been, never would have been. But obviously with worked with Cricket South Africa with good men like Robbi P for years, and Chris at Sevens and across SA Rugby for years, and since then obviously created a platform called the Jeff Fitness Community, which is 100,000 people in 73 countries around the world, where I'm basically not looking after sports people, but I'm looking after women between the ages of 30 to 65-year-old, which is very different and challenging. But I think like where the one thing I've heard about it and having worked with people on that, like haven't seen Robbi K for many years and haven't seen Braam from coaching clinics in the SA Rugby for years, is just the word trauma is a big one for me. And I think that was the beginning of my journey, where I was offered a 5-year contract to re-sign with SA Rugby, and I didn't, because the trauma that was inflicted on me when I had to travel the day that for another 2-week tour, when I walked my first daughter out of hospital on that day and put in a plan for 2.5 weeks, was like a sort of like a trauma. And it's the same sort of trauma that fulfills in many cricket players who have I've witnessed, and they've had to fly back and forth from tours and having to miss that and coming back for 2 days and then disappearing. And the relatable thing about that is an injury as well. Trev, it's like it's your big avenue. It's like injuries, trauma, man. Psychologically, physically, I've seen Chris go through so many injuries. The man he's bionic, man, and his discipline is something that is unquestioned. It's incredible to see how he's brought himself back. But like that trauma that's inflicted is something which needs to be bottomed out in players, and how they deal with that. But also just, from my experience, I mean, the opportunity the players have, like for me, out of this panel discussion, and Lauren, if you're listening, I'd love to do it more, because just sitting and listening is so good, and it's so refreshing, because the connections that you make in sport are amazing. The people that you meet are amazing, and you never know if that person could open a door down the scope. But you have to be like sort of skilled up and understand what is that connection. Who's this person who owns this massive business, who's got a big wallet and buying me lots of drinks and dinners and stuff like that. Like, but it's not about the drinks and dinners right there. It's like, what can they do for me down the road, and what does that look like, and how do we upskill people from a new generation of entrepreneurial sports people, like I'm so inspired by someone like Chris, who 3 years or 4 years prior to retiring was starting to study about the career path that he wanted to go into. Robbi P's always been a gentleman and a scholar of trying to upskill himself, and he's got the charismatic approach to become a world-class coach, and I've no doubt he will coach South Africa one day. And those are the sort of like skills I would love to see going forward, because if I can create a business which has got 80 staff and thousands of members around the world, anyone can do it, because I'm a clown. But I just saw the opportunity, a small window of opportunity, and I forced my way through that opportunity. And I think there's such a massive scope to upskill people through that trauma, whatever trauma it may be, physical, mental, whatever it may be, and point them in the right direction where they can become seriously successful people in their lives. But I think, I love what Trevor's doing and following it very closely, because and I'd love to do stuff with you, Trev, because I just think that what he's hitting on the nose is just like can be transferable through so many different skills and sets, and which is not glamorous, as opposed to going on tours and wearing the blazer and having a tracksuit on and walking through the airport and having people recognize you and the people and the players and having a drink at that. And it might be just about looking after other people and having a different purpose, and how you align that, if that makes sense. That could just be someone's calling from that perspective. So I think like trauma is a key word. It's what ignited my fire in me. And I'd love to address that further on, but I just think different scopes, which are transferable skills, which we all have in us, because make no mistake, it's hard to walk into a stadium of 100,000 people, be it in India, in France, in Cape Town Stadium for Sevens final or whatever it may be. Braam kicking, a penalty to win the game against Australia. That is hard. Signing deals for companies is not hard. That's hard, and if you can transfer that skill. Wow, our sports people deserve huge recognition in the business world. So that's encouraging from our point of view.
Yeah, I must say, just thanks to Renaldo for just your honesty. I think there were a few messages that came through in the chat as well. But having that sort of message to youngsters today from a guy like yourself that's just retired, I think that's really the first step for these youngsters, and of where they should be going with their careers from an earlier age. And also, the things that Trevor brought in, I think it's absolutely spot on. I mean, guys are vulnerable with injuries. It's the best time really to crack into their mental psyche about, there is a much bigger picture at play throughout all of this. I mean, Braam mentioned earlier, I mean, I know Braam very personally. We coached together and we played together. He's been through, his own little bit of hell in recent times. He doesn't let on to it. He thinks he's been brave and harakat, which he is. But he's been through absolute hell. Potentially could have lost a lot of things in his life in the last 2 years, but he's still cracking on. So, thank you to all of you for your absolutely candid and forthrightness with regards to this issue, because it's something that's very close to my heart. I know there's a question from Dawn regarding players, and particularly young players, which I deal with at Grey High School. Dawn, you actually can't save them from social media because they're actually their own worst enemies. They generally tend to post most of what they want onto these platforms. And yeah, a lot of it that comes back at them, I don't think they're equipped to deal with. At Grey, they do have a permanent psychologist that sees these kids regarding their performances, their injuries, their depressions. But that's not enough, not for school kids, and certainly not for professionals. We're at the levels that we've all played at and worked at. I don't think there's even enough done what South African rugby are doing now, which they're actually doing quite a bit through my players. But it's not even the tip of the iceberg if you consider what the likes of the Irish guys are doing with Europa, the RPA is doing in England, Renaldo. And I'm not sure what CSO is doing with the cricketers either, Robin. It's a big thing that I think needs to be expanded a lot more on. And I think we all need to add our stories, like Renaldo has just done, to that piece of the puzzle so these youngsters can have an opportunity to learn.
I've just got a quick statement, and then I've got a question for all the guys on the panel. And I think the statement is, most of the people on this panel is from a rugby background, and this statement is more for the audience. I do believe the problem is wider than rugby. Robbi P, you'll back that up because you're the one cricket player. I trust your left arm is still fine. And it's not just rugby and cricket. We've got soccer. We've got fight clubs. The cage fighters, the boxers. We've got some of the martial arts guys. We've got athletics. So I think this is an issue in every sport, and it crosses all those boundaries. I don't think it's just particularly rugby, but I do know it's a big issue in rugby and it's not being dealt with. So will this discussion continue? Yes, I do believe so. All the panelists, I trust you will, make yourself available if possible, if time allows it. I think we touched the iceberg tonight, guys. We've got quite a bit more to discuss around this. But I've got one question. Whose job is it to assist and help the younger players? Does the responsibility lie on the unions? Does it lie on the coaches? Does it lie on senior players? Who's supposed to take accountability for it? And should we put accountability on someone? Or is the best route to take to upskill as many people in the industry as possible? So that, like Chris, when that opportunity was given to you, you stepped up, you became a mentor for another player, even though you required a mentor at that stage yourself. So whose job is it? Does anybody want to give me some kind of answer in that direction, if possible? And I'm adding, if possible. Robbi?
I think it's everybody's responsibility that's surrounded by someone that's in the performance space. One thing that surprised me becoming a coach is actually the amount of parents coming to you asking, how does the kid become a professional sportsman? Because all they see is the glitz and glamour. When I start talking to them about the reality of it, all of a sudden you see the expression on their faces change, but not in a bad way. You're just trying to make them aware of the pitfalls. And it's almost you feel that this is a forum for even parents of kids. I mean, there's hundreds of kids, thousands, millions in South Africa wanting to be professional sportsmen. And I think when you spend most of your time at home and with coaches at a sports field, so I think those are two of the probably most critical people that should be educated around this is probably parents at the moment, just looking how big school sports is actually becoming around South Africa at the minute.
I think, Deon, I agree with Robin to a certain extent, but I think as well, I mean, I can speak from a rugby perspective, and especially from a team, and I presume, cricket would be the same, and soccer, so any team sport really, that I think that there's enough knowledge out there at the moment for managers of teams, administrations and managers of teams to understand the need for this type of support. And I think it's their responsibility as well to employ psychologists or mental health practitioners who are interested in the connection side of psychology. I mean, I've got no problem with the performance psychology. I think some of the stuff works. I think there's always more stuff that you can learn psychologically to become better rugby players and better, and that's what you contracted to do as a sportsman. I mean, make no mistake, as a professional rugby player, you're there to play rugby, not there to actualize your artistic abilities or whatnot. That can come afterwards. But I think there's enough knowledge for the need for psychological support and mental health support. And I think it needs to start being more directed towards the emotional and cognitive development of these players alongside the performance. And I think psychologists who are employed at these unions should also start looking at it a little bit more, because they are the custodians of mental health. That's what psychology is about.
I like that answer. Braam, I'm going to give you the last word if that's fine.
Go from first to last. That's not too bad. Deon, and I might hit a nerve here, but for me, everybody's talking about the brotherhood in rugby. I think when you finish the game, you feel very isolated, and there's no brotherhood. I know there's some guys that are getting along, and me and Robbi has done a lot together. We've been through a hell of a lot together as well. So we've known each other better. That we like brothers because of what has transpired. For me, the big thing is I think everybody needs to take hands. Everybody in all sports needs to take hands and guide these youngsters, because I see this every day with the students that I'm working with. Some of them struggling to finish their studies. Some of them really trying hard, but they've got only one eye on the ball, and that is rugby. So for me, I think we need to get back to our roots. We need to talk about brotherhood, and then everybody needs to dig deep and again assist these guys with whoever, however we can do it. We need to keep this forum hot. It needs to be a burning fire. That for me was one of the big things that I said. And again, through my struggles over the last 15 years, now I'm in a position that I can really help some of these guys with the bad decisions that I've made. With the heartaches that went through my life. My life take a big turn when I was a young man. How did I get through those things? I don't know. I'm very blessed. I can say thank you to the people that have surrounded me, my wife, my kids, that gave me the energy to keep on fighting and just go for everything that's just who I am. But for me, the big thing is, can we get back to the brotherhood that we've always been talking about that's in this game? But as soon as we leave the game, we are very isolated. Everybody goes their own little merry way. They don't care about the rest of the boys. And I think that's where I think we need to focus our energy, is to make sure we look after everybody and make sure they get guidance from the guys that this forum and some of the guys that have said, I wish I knew what I know now. 20 years ago, flip it, I would have had an easy ride there. But again, that sometimes you have to go through those transitions in life to really enjoy and really, what's the right word? So my English lost me. It's just
If Afrikaans will translate.
Ek dink 'n mens moet kyk. Ek ervaar 'n euforia want iewes skielik het ek iets reg gekry. I've been through an incredible transition in the last 2 years, but at the moment I'm in such a good space. So how can I help someone? How can I teach someone to make the right decisions at a young age, so he doesn't have to pay school fees for 15 years of his life and maybe lose everything before he actually gets to that point where he can actually excel. So for me, that is an absolute priority. And I think these guys, that's why we got onto this panel, because there's a lot more to it than just playing rugby.
Guys, I'm gonna thank everybody on this panel. I see some of the guys have dropped off. Load shedding came in exactly at 8 o'clock, and some of the cameras went off immediately. Such a fun country to be in, isn't it? So I want to thank everybody again on this panel. Guys, we are absolutely, if it's okay with you, we're definitely going to continue this discussion. I think talking about it is great. We need to talk about it, but we need to absolutely take it to the next level, because just talking about it is not going to change anything. We need to start doing something, but we need to just, there needs to be a strategy behind what's going to be done. There are a lot of strategies in place already. Can we upskill more people? I do believe it's possible. Every challenge has a solution. And I do hope that this type of discussion will just stir the right people in this industry. So from me, Deon, and the panel here, I just want to say thank you kindly. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the contribution. It's highly appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deon. Thanks, guys.
Nice to see everyone.
You all look after yourself. Eh?
Yes.
God bless.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.